Hello, I'm Master Denny. I'm a certified master in the art and craft of jewel cutting. And today I'll be doing a presentation on the process of how we go from a rough gemstone, like this big chunk of amethyst here, or this Oregon sunstone, which is my favorite. You kind of see it in the light, it has that nice red in it. And I'll take these rocks and transform them into a beautiful gem, like this pink sapphire. This is a very lovely stone. Now, one of the differences you're going to find with the type of cutting I do is considered fancy, world class. What you find in ordinary jewelry stores is commercial cutting. They're cut for production, for weight. Now, whenever you do that, you don't really get the best performance out of the jewel. And one of the reasons why is they don't take in consideration what I call the critical angle. Now, a critical angle, as I describe it, is if you take a stick and you put it in the water and it looks like it's bent, well, when light passes through a gemstone, it bends differently depending on what kind of gem it is. So we want to take that in consideration when we're cutting the stone, because we want the best performance out of a stone. We want that stone to really throw a lot of light right back at you. What we don't want to have happen is have the light go straight through the stone, then it's dull and lifeless. What we want to have happen is that light to go down through the stone, come back at, and just throw all that light right back at you. That's where you get a lot of the brilliance, a lot of the pizzazz out of the stone. And that's when you get the best quality, world-class jewel. And that's the type of cutting I do. Now, when you cut the stone, you go through different grits. You start with a rough stone like this, which is the way it comes out of the ground. You know, it's all weird shaped. And we want to get rid of the bulk of the material and get it down into the basic shape that's going to be from the initial cut. And I've got some examples right here. Now, as you can see on this one right here, it looks a little white because it's really heavily scratched. Like when you receive furniture, it's got a scratch, it's white. No, it's the same thing. So this one is done with a heavy grip with that preforming to get it in the basic shape before we cut. And then this is in the middle of the process, and you can see how it's a little bit lighter and you can kind of see through it a little bit. And then this one on the end is completed cut and polish. Now there are different stages you go in through here, but I showed these three so you can see the very distinct difference as you go through the cutting process. Now once the stone is cut, like this one here is cut and polished, now I've got to cut the other half, but it's still attached to what's called the dopstick. So I need to do the transfer. So I'll take another dopstick like this and I'll put it in a transfer block. Then I will remove this dopstick. And this one here is already, the transfer has been made. I just have to take this dopstick off and then I can cut the other half of the stone. Now cutting the gemstone, we have our designs or cutting instructions on the process we do to go through and cut the stone. The designs I use are computer-aided designs, so they take in consideration that critical angle so that I can get the best pizzazz out of the stone, the best quality brightness, and the most value out of the stone. And I put together some cutting instructions here. I just made these up just to give you an example. You have two parts of the stone. You got the pavilion, which is the bottom, and the crown, which is the top. Now within the cutting instructions on the pavilion, I've got 3 tiers. Those are 3 different sets of cutting. Like this first one here, I set the angle at 44 degrees, and then I cut indexes based on these numbers here. And then once I get that done, I reset to the new angle and cut at the different angle indexes. So I've got a stone already set up here, and I'm not going to cut it all the way. The cutting process can take anywhere from 5 to 50 hours, depending on how big the stone is, what type of stone it is, how hard it is, and how complex the design. And also, the more valuable the stone, the more I'm going to pay attention to getting everything just right, because if it's a valuable stone, you don't want to miscut and lose value. So this one here I've already got set up, and when I showed you on the instruction the angle, This is the angle, and it's based upon this protractor, like this. And I've put the stone in what's called the quill, that's this thing. And then the indexes are how I'm going to be cutting the stone around it this direction. So I've got this angle, and then I'll be going at different directions. And I've already got this one set up for the initial cut. And this right here is called a lap. And now before I start, I bring my water down for coolant. And sometimes I have to use oil. And what this does is it prevents the stone from getting overheated and creates a lubricant, and it also takes away the small particles that are grind off. Some people ask me, what do you do with the leftover pieces after you're done cutting? Well, there aren't any. You grind it down and it's like dust, and they call that swarf. Now this is my thimble. This adjusts how deep into the stone I go. So initially I'll start off, and as I get closer to, you can start hearing when I'm hitting the lap now. So I'm starting to cut, and I'm going to lower it a little more. And then I start doing my cut. And I'll probably lower a little bit more. Like I said, I want to just do a little cutting, just to kind of show you the process. So you can see how it does. Like I said, I have to go through several grits. And then once I get down to the last grit, then I can go to the polish. And on a stone that may have 100 facets, I may have to go through 6 grits to get down there. So essentially I'll be cutting 600 facets. And it's a very time-consuming process, but at the end result is well worth it. And I'll speed this up by raising it a little bit more. So this initial cut was on the 96 index, so now I'm going to swing over to the other side. You see I spun it over, and you can kind of see the cut I did there. Now I've got a really heavy grit here, so it's taking a lot of material off pretty quick, but I'll change that later because I have to go through several grits before I get to the polish. So now I'm going to flip it over to the other side, and that's part of the instructions, and then I'll cut my next tier. Yeah, like I said, this is actually going pretty fast because I'm not cutting all the way, and I'm using a heavier grit to start off with, just to give you an example of how it goes. Okay, now I've finished this tier, like I said when I was showing you there. So now I'm going to go to my next tier. So I have to change my angle. And I get it set to right there. Now, based on my instructions I have over here, I need to change my index. And what the goal is, when I cut, I'm going to meet that point where I last left off to try to bring it down to where it just touches. It's called meet point. So now I'm going to raise my thimble up so I know where I'm starting at on the depth. Okay, so now I'm going to bring it down. Bring it down a little more. Like I said, this is going pretty quickly because I'm using a heavy grit and I've got a lot of stone on here to work with. Now I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm not quite there, but I'm pretty close to meeting that point. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit further. And my goal is to get to that point because that's the point I want to be, and it's just a little bit more. And cutting stones is kind of like cutting hair. You can always take a little more off, but you can't put it back on. Now I go to my next step. Now I've got my depth set, so now I continue with my cutting. Now I'll go to my next one. And this is all at the same angle because that's what the tier requires me to do in the cutting instructions. And I've got one more on this side of the stone. And now you can see the cuts I made there. You can see how they're set. I flip the other side, you can see how it's not cut yet. So I'll just do those real quick. Since I'm on the same tier, I don't have to change the angle. So I'm going to just hit this one real quick. Now you can see where I've made a cut. Like I said, I'm removing a lot of material now. This is much faster than you normally go. But like I said, it takes several hours to do it correctly. And I still got a lot of stone there to play with to go through the process of the different grits. So I believe that gives you a good example of how gemstones are cut. And like I said, the type of cutting I do is called fancies. These are very unique designs. They're not commercial cuts. They're not production cutting. This is world-class jewel cutting. This is going to be gems that you can, some jewels that you can pass down to your children's children. And they are exceptional. Like if you look on that pink sapphire again, you can see how nice that is. Well, it's been a pleasure having you in my shop today, and I thank you for watching.